Welcome to Book Reporter Talks To, where our guest today is Ashley Audrain, the debut author of The Push. I first heard about this book last summer from Kristen Hanna. She had read it and blurbed it, and when we were talking one day, she wanted to know if I had read it because she was dying to talk to someone about this book. Her blurb was so dead on, where she was saying The Push is starkly original and compulsively readable. And I'll tell you, this is what we call a one-sit read, folks. When you sit down, you're going to keep turning those pages. So I completely agree. It's a book reporter bets on selection. And you know, for me, those are the books that I'm betting you're going to love. So welcome, Ashley. It's so nice to have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Carol. It's so nice to be here chatting with you. Thank you for that nice introduction.
So now let's start with you telling everyone about The Push.
Sure. So The Push is a novel about a woman named Blythe. And Blythe comes from a history of women who have struggled greatly with motherhood. And she is determined that she's going to break that cycle. She's going to be different. She's going to be the warm, engaged, present mother that she always wanted to have and didn't. And so she and her husband welcome a baby, Violet. And it's not long until she starts to think that there is something wrong with Violet. She is aloof and very distant. She's quite an angry little girl. And she starts to then witness some malicious behavior towards other children, which obviously is very concerning for her. And the problem, of course, is that her husband cannot see in Violet what Blythe sees. He thinks this is very much a result of the internal anxiety and sort of the fears of motherhood that she's carried for so long. So they sort of try to move on and have another baby, Sam. And in Sam, Blythe really finds that connection she's looking for until something in the family goes terribly wrong. And they're all sort of forced to really take a look at, who their daughter is, who Blythe herself is, what has happened. And the family sort of unravels from there.
Yeah, they totally unravel, but it's also the dynamic because her husband's name is Fox. So it's Blythe and Fox, daughters Violet and Sam. And Fox is not seeing what she's seeing at all. So this poor woman is really alone in trying to understand her child. She's trying to have that ultimate, as you say, bonding experience, and it's just not happening. And it's just so strange because she's trying to describe to him, did you see what just happened? And he's like, no, I don't see it at all. Like, I don't see what you're talking about. So it was,
Yeah.
I think you talk a lot about the pressures of motherhood. And I know that, I saw you in a previous interview talking about your son's birth brought some challenges to you. And you realize that this textbook that we all read about, what to expect when you're expecting and it doesn't, with a myth, kind of goes away as soon as the baby is born. So do you think that there are really idealistic views about motherhood out there right now that you are looking at on this page?
Yes, I think that, I think we have completely idealistic views about how motherhood should be. And it's interesting to me how much they haven't really changed, over the years. We've come so far in so many other ways as a society and with women and how we treat women, how we think about women. But motherhood always seems like sort of that one place where, we haven't come all that far. And I was really interested about writing about just those expectations of motherhood, we are really taught from a very young age as women to that, motherhood is going to be a certain way, it's going to look a certain way. And we're expected to sort of, embody a certain kind of mother. As a writer, I think a lot about language. And I think a lot about just, the language that we're supposed to use as mothers, about our kids and about the experience. And I think, there's so many examples of the ways that women kind of feel that pressure, from the time, even before you have children or before you're pregnant, but from the time you are pregnant, all the way through kind of raising your children. And I wanted to really look at the case of a woman who really struggled with that, who kind of came up against an experience that, was one that none of us never want to have, certainly. Yes, that was the mindset I really wanted to get into.
And I feel like also with social media today, the mommy shaming, the pressure is unbelievable. I mean, it's not just dressing a child lovely for a holiday or something like that. It's every single day, all day, what your watched is, what's going on, what's doing. And I often joke that, do no children ever cry? Because no one ever cries on social media. Everybody's just typically fabulous. And I was trying to picture poor Blythe, with this child up on social media, and you just feel like Violet would never smile. She'd never do what you were supposed to do.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned social media because I think that, the reason that maybe we feel more pressure than we ever have as mothers is because of social media. Like we are all on it and
Mhm.
participating in some way. Most of us are. I know I am.
Right.
And, it's interesting because there's a bit of a, this opposite of where we feel like, we're connected in this community of moms a lot of time online. And that's a very good thing. It's a good
Mhm.
thing that we have that, but we are sharing more than we ever have before.
Mhm.
Like you said, we're sharing what our lives look like. We're sharing what our kids are like. We're, sharing glimpses of motherhood all the time, but there's still such a pressure to curate what that looks like.
Mhm.
It is like, it's almost like, the message is kind of like from society is sort of like share, but don't share too much. Like don't share the real stuff, just share enough so that, you feel a connection with people. And so, and I do not say that as a judgment because I am that mom. Like I find myself doing that too,
Right.
I recently was looking back at some photos that I had. It was on one social media somewhere, and it was a picture with my daughter, and she was newborn, and I'd posted a photo about how tired I was, and I kind of had her on it, and I did not look tired in that picture. Like it had a black and white filter on it, and I thought, what? Like no, like I did not look tired. I had a black and white filter on the picture. So it's one of those things where we want to share, but we want it to look a certain way, and I don't blame moms for that because there is so much judgment and shame.
Yeah, and you click through the pictures of which one you're going to take, which one's the good one. I mean,
Exactly.
I worked at Condé Nast for 17 years, and I feel like every single day is like a photo shoot. It's like
Yeah.
you can't just make dinner; you have to photograph dinner. It's got to look right. Did you use that placemat before? And for children, and you don't know what they're going to do. My sons are 25 and 30 now, and I joke that they can't take a picture without someone making a goofy face. And I'm like, can we
Yeah.
just get one? Just one? Like you were so
It's
cute
so
when you were
true.
three, you know?
It's true. Yeah.
But it's interesting because in the book, at the very beginning, before the birth of Violet, Blythe and Fox, they are supportive, they love one another. Their weekends are these idyllic weekends, and they really are connecting with each other. And he beams at Violet. He just looks at her, and that's his girl, and he absolutely loves it. And she's struggling to find the love. Was that difficult for you to write, of putting that barrier up for her while he is just thinking everything is so fabulous?
Yeah, I found it really interesting to write. I really liked kind of exploring that dynamic. Yeah, I think, it's interesting writing. The book is told from this, tight perspective of Blythe, kind of talking to her husband. It's sort of in a hybrid, sort of a second person
Mhm.
perspective. And that was neat as a writer to do because, we only ever get Blythe's view of her husband's experience.
Mhm.
And an early reader had said to me, oh, I just, I was reading and I would have just loved to hear like a little bit from Fox, just to hear like how, because, and I think that's sort of what I want the reader to imagine, like what is his side of this story.
Mhm.
And he certainly does feel very connected to her. And I think what's interesting about Fox is, I've had some people say he's, a hugely unlikable character, and some people say, they liked him to a certain point and then didn't, and vice versa. Like everybody seems to have quite mixed feelings about him. And he goes through his own transition in the book, but I think what you could say about Fox is that, if you look at his motivations behind how much he only wanted to see the good in Violet, like, well, was he being a good dad? Is that being a good father? Did he owe
Mhm.
her that? Did he owe his daughter that? And if you sort of had to choose between, really, wanting to see your daughter a certain way and kind of, listening to your wife, I mean, there are people who would say, he prioritized his daughter and that was a good thing. I mean, there's obviously, the reality is there was a middle ground where he should have been that he was not, um, but yeah, so I think it's interesting. It is interesting to think about kind of the choices that he had and the choices he made and sort of how he aligned himself with
Mhm.
his daughter.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it was thus her against the mother. So many, and she felt, and with her personality, that she had an ally that empowered her. Then, if the father had said stop, she may have stopped, but she wasn't stopping for anything because she was going for
Yeah,
him. You know,
exactly.
there's this really great line where Blythe meets another new mother, and that mom says, "It's just like he just happened to me all of a sudden, slammed into my world and knocked over the furniture." And the changes that a child brings are often romanticized. And here I feel that Blythe totally understands what that woman is saying. And that very honest conversation those two mothers have is saying so much in the book. Was that something you wanted to bringing across right from the beginning?
Yeah, I did. I really enjoyed writing that scene. It's a scene where, Blythe kind of happens upon another mother, like out, in a coffee shop, and she's so isolated and feeling so lonely, and like she hasn't connected with anybody over motherhood, and she sort of just meets eyes with this woman through the window of the coffee shop, and she can see for the first time in that mother's eyes that there's something she finally recognizes, and it's in the way that the mother is kind of holding the baby, like not in a loving way, but sort of an examining way. And that scene was important to me because I think that there's so much truth in that, and those, and I remember sort of observing that in people as well, especially in kind of the early days of motherhood when I had an infant. And I really was very focused on just seeing the way women kind of interacted with their babies. And, in those gestures, that sort of says a lot. So that scene was important to me because, I think it was a bit of an unspoken thing.
She saw that woman and she just knew that they could bond. She saw that they could bond. So Sam gives her a different look at motherhood. He's warm and bubbly and happy. He's everything that Violet is not. I felt like I was breathing again when I got to those pages. And when you were writing about that, were you too? Were you started breathing again then too? Because I was holding my breath before of what was going to happen.
Yes, I was. Yes. And I, those scenes they did bring me joy to write. And I think they bring the reader joy. Hopefully they bring the reader joy to read. They are, I think that, Blythe she has more of a typical bonding experience with her second child. And that, that scene was, easy for me to write because I very much bonded with my two children right away. And so that, I could put myself in those shoes quite easily. But yeah, I think the interesting thing is really, again, like, so much of this book is in, the ambiguity of things. We don't really know what, and Blythe doesn't even really, she's questioning herself quite a bit and living in that gray space. And it's interesting to think of, how in her mind, like how much did she just desperately want to have that bond with Sam, and so kind of made it happen, and it was almost like that bond with Sam sort of proved to Blythe that, she wasn't, out to lunch with her daughter, that like, she had it in her. That was a very important, feeling for her to access. And I think, an incredibly satisfying part of the book for her, and hopefully for readers, as they kind of see that, she's sort of proved something to herself. And I think she sort of feels like she's proved something to her husband as well in that moment, who is really kind of, losing faith in her in terms of like the kind of mother that he wanted her to be. The kind of mother that Blythe was is very inconvenient for Fox. And, he's very hard on her because of that, which is obviously very unfair. And so, she really feels like in her bond with her second child, she's finally saying to him, like, look, I do have it in me. I can do it. The problem is not me. The problem is her. So that was a really important kind of crux of kind of the family relationship, I think.
And it's interesting because you're juxtapositioning the whole story against the story of her mother and her grandmother, who dealt with many mental demons. And there's so much backstory there that you're looking at what Blythe has been through, but she hasn't had strong women role models. She's had crazy women role models as well. And when she looks at Violet, she's looking at them and thinking about the challenges that they had and the challenges, like, is this something that skipped a generation, or am I part of it, or what's going on? Can you speak about that a little? Because the backstory on both of those women is woven through so skillfully that there are times you're looking like, wow, this is what this woman was up against.
Thank you. Yes. I thought that became a really important part of the book. And it wasn't always my original intention to go back and look at those other two generation of women. I was very much at the beginning kind of focused on Blythe and, keeping kind of tight in her marriage and in this family. But as I was developing Blythe more, I realized, I can't really understand Blythe unless I understand the women that she came from. And so I think, my journey of kind of exploring who those women were was sort of also hers, in a sense that we're sort of piecing that together as kind of we go through the book. And yeah, I think that is important and also very true to life. I think that I've always been very interested in kind of that chain of motherhood, like how do we mother, in the same ways and in different ways than the mothers that we came from. And then in turn, what did our mothers learn from their mothers? And I've my grandmother has passed now, but I wish that I could have ask her more questions now, or talk to her a bit more about what her experience is like there. And I think many of us do. And I think, in the situation in a family where there's a more traumatic history, so it's rare that is talked about. It's rare that is explored. And if it is, often it's, later in adult life, maybe, but certainly not, usually when we're in kind of our 20s and early 30s and having families of our own. And so, yeah, that idea of that intergenerational trauma came into it from there. And I always think, I don't know if you've felt this way, but you can sort of see when people come from a difficult past,
Mm-hmm.
you sort of see that they either go one of two ways. They either repeat that history because they feel either like there's no way that they can't, or it's all they know, or they sort of fight like hell to not repeat that,
Mm-hmm.
and they go in the very opposite direction. And I think that's kind of human nature, to want to fall into one of those. And Blythe is very, I think, aware of that. And that's sort of a lot of her internal struggle is, I don't want to be over here. I want to go over here, but she almost doesn't trust herself, and so, yeah, I think that history is just so crucial to understanding who she is.
Oh, and it's so well done because it's so detailed, the whole history of what you're going through. And then she's got this mother-in-law who's very supportive. She's got no family. And there's this really sad line when the wedding is being planned: there will be no table for the family of the bride. And I read that line and it was just like this abject sadness of, oh my gosh, there's nobody there for her. Like her side of the church is like empty, everything. But you made her so alone that when she questions being normal, you can see why. But the mother-in-law tries to help, but she's clearly in her son's camp. I mean, let's get real. She's not going to just be, was she always this alone when you were writing her? So Blythe was always that alone. And then you have this peak of, oh, I'm going to help you, dear. And then she gets pulled back again.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun writing the mother-in-law character because she's nothing like my mother-in-law, but yeah, I think for that reason, I sort of like the idea of, Blythe having these glimpses, like especially in the mother-in-law, a glimpse of somebody who might reach out to her, who might get her. And I think we see those little moments when the mother-in-law, does give little nods of recognition to Blythe. But the mother-in-law is somebody who is this quote unquote perfect mother. She's got the perfect, haircut and makes the perfect dinner and had the perfect house and made the curtains and, all that stuff in Fox's house growing up. And so, for me, I think her mother-in-law was somebody who does very much recognize the struggles of motherhood, but would never have talked about it and would never have shown it and would always have pretended that was perfect. And I think a lot of, people can relate, a lot of women can relate to that. And so I liked the idea of her being able to recognize that and maybe contemplating how much of a, branch to hold out to her. And Blythe also being a little uncertain of how much she could say, because she knows that, at the end of the day, she is always going to side with her son, and that's like, something that Blythe can't relate to with her daughter. And so there's just such an interesting dynamic there. And just that she's, really filling in as this mother figure role, in the book that Blythe doesn't have in present day.
And she's like, oh, let me go take the baby. You can rest. Let me go take this. But Blythe knows it's just being parceled out. It's not going to be, Mom, you've got to come for a week and just come help me. It's not going to be like that. And I think she's definitely feeling that tension, And
she also doesn't want the judgment of that. She doesn't want the judgment of that mother-in-law sort of in her house all the time. There's a scene that was fun to write, which was her, it ultimately ends up being, a sad scene, but it's, they're home at Blythe's house for dinner, and, Fox is out with his father. And so it's just the two women and Violet. And you sort of see that awkwardness of sort of, the mother watching Blythe kind of interact with her and how she treats her. And just that tension of judgment, and you just know somebody's watching your every move and what they're thinking about you. I think again, that's something we can probably relate to on some level at some point in kind of bringing up our own kids.
Why are you doing it like that? Why are you doing it like that? And they're like, okay, this is just the way it's going to be,
Yeah, exactly.
As she was growing up, there was a neighbor who was always there for Blythe. And it's someone who saw her pain and did big and little things to support her. And readers, and I'm not going to give anything away, but people, there's a lot I'm not giving away, may be surprised to learn something about her later on in the book, a detail that was not mentioned before that will give you a little bit of pause and make you do some thinking. Subtle things like that are things I love so much about this book. The things that you slid in for the reader. Was it fun doing that for you? Because it was, I feel like there's so many moments where you're just like, wait, what just happened? What just did there?
Yeah, thank you. It is fun to kind of put those little clues in a book along the way, for sure. And I think most of them, come in revisions, like through many, 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 many revisions, and really great like editor input about kind of things that should be planted. And I think it is fun to kind of go back and sort of almost like look for little clues about all the different kinds of things that are coming in the book. It is really fun to do that. I think that's part of the, like, I really like revisions. I've really enjoyed the revision process, and that's definitely one of the things, is kind of going back to do those plants. And I Mrs. Ellington's character, I love her character, and I had so much fun writing it. And to me, she brings the joy to the book that you sort of need to balance out the darkness, because she's the mother character that Blythe certainly would have loved, to have all through her life. And I think I had a soft spot for her the whole time I was writing. Yeah. And then someone said to me, as they were kind of reading halfway through the book, they texted me and said, the one thing I don't know if I can speak to you after if something bad happens to that woman. Because it was, she's just, yeah. So
she won everybody's heart. She won everybody's heart. And
I
just felt like when I was reading about her, and I was reading what was going, she just had this sixth sense of what Blythe needed. And that's what I really love, because there are women who do that in life. They're the person that just sees the child that's not happy on the playground and makes them feel good. There's just a subtle nature to the whole thing. And it's not about something for them. It's about something really for the child. And I feel like she was a heroic character in such a big way. And it's a kind of heroic that we don't talk about a lot, but it's the kind that we really want to be there.
Oh yeah, I love that. That's a really good way of describing her. Yeah, there are, again, we won't give anything away, but there are some moments, towards the end where, she demonstrates some very compassionate gestures towards Blythe, to help her through a moment that, almost like looks ahead to what she's going to need, and she's there for her. And that, that's very much a maternal sort of gesture that she just doesn't have in her life. And so, yeah, I think she's special that way. Yeah.
Well, and the book opens with Blythe standing outside watching her family through a window. And readers automatically know that she's not part of these people's lives. Was that always the opener? Like, did you, or did that happen in revision? I was so curious.
Oh yeah. I should go. I can't remember exactly when. I think it was always the opening. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I think it was always the open.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I think there's all these opinions about, prologues or what, how much should you give, all, throwing that out the window. It was sort of what felt right. I liked the idea of, I think first of all, it did kind of require a bit of a setup, a setup in terms of, we needed to start in some action, and that felt to me like the perfect place to start, because we know things are not going to go well in this story from that opening, but we have no idea, how and where and all of that. And it was just a fun scene to write. Yeah, it was really, there's a creepiness to it, I hope, and, emotion to it. It takes a full circle at the end.
Yes, it takes a full circle. That's what I really love too. It's like, it's really funny. As I'm talking to you, there's a cat obviously walking outside behind you. It's adding a spookiness to the whole thing. And I'm like,
how fitting. That's perfect. Oh.
It was just so perfect. And I just said, wait a second, there's a little cat walking behind you.
That's my neighbor's fence and my neighbor's cat, I guess, going for a little stroll. Yeah.
It like paused at a moment when you were talking. The cat was definitely very involved. It's very funny. Most of the book is written in the second person as almost an entreaty to Fox to explain what went on. Was it always second person? Because you so rarely see a book written like that, and it's just so special as a result.
Thank you. It was always that. It was always second person, and it was always that voice. And it's funny, I don't think I really recognized it as second person at first. And I think it was like very far down the road. I think like an editor or something said to me about second person, and I was like, oh God, yeah, it is. Like that was not intentional. It was more of a realization after. But I think it just was always the voice. It was just like the very first day that I sat down to write Blythe's voice, it always came out speaking to Fox, and not intentional, just what it was. And I just sort of rolled with it. And thankfully, it, wasn't something that anybody wanted me to change as we kind of got along. Yeah.
It was funny because I had to look up what second person was, because somebody said it's written in second person. I'm like, wait a second, what's first person? I know. With second person, I never really thought about it, but I said,
Same.
it's a very different way of writing. So I was, oh, it's second person. That's what that's called. Okay. So,
and a few people since have mentioned some other books to me that are in second person. And so I'm excited to go back and read those. Well, the Lionel Shriver, We Need to Talk About Kevin is
yes. Yes.
Which again, I didn't realize until after, and some other ones. So now I'm kind of curious to go sort of exploring those kinds of books just to enjoy that. Yeah.
We want to do a feature on that at some point on Book Reporter. We might do books that are like written that way, because it is, you're in the book a different way when you're looking at it from that point of view. But this is a thriller, but it's also a big story about family. When you were planning to write this, did you have a plan and outline? Did you have all the sticky papers up on the wall of what you were doing? Or, oh God, no, Carol, I wasn't doing that at all.
I have always wanted a sticky note wall as a writer, and I have never had one, and I maybe never will, but I love the idea of it. But no, I didn't. I did not set out to write a psychological thriller at all. It was really not on my radar. It wasn't like, there were obviously big books at the time that were coming out around the time I started writing, like Gone Girl had been out and Girl on a Train. But that was not what I envisioned myself writing at the beginning. And I just wanted to write about motherhood and expectations and the things we talked about. And I was writing in very short bursts of time when I started, like, a few hours here, a few hours there during the week, because I had a 6-month-old. And so writing was not my full day. So really I was kind of writing very much in the style the book is now, like sort of a scene here, a scene there, a scene there. But I hadn't plotted anything out at the beginning. I was just exploring for quite a while, like probably over a year. And then I started realizing, okay, I feel like there is something here. Like, I feel like I can sort of see the novel kind of coming together. And then I did, I think, get caught up in trying to make it a certain way at that point. I think then my brain, I worked in publicity and in publishing. And so I think my brain started going like, okay, well, what is working out there? And what are the books that people are reading? And, you start to get on the train of the trend, the trend train. And then I did start to kind of make it a little like trying to look for twists. And I had another whole different plot line that's not in the book now, and a whole different set of characters. And sort of went pretty far down that road. And at the heart of it was always, Blythe and the motherhood story, but it looked differently. And there became a time when I felt like I was close, and I needed readers. I hadn't shared it with anybody for like years, and thought, okay, I've got to someone has to pry this from my hands and help me to work on this. And one of the readers I had was my partner, Mike, and he read it, and he's not a big reader, but I thought, well, he'll be like a good, objective kind of lens to see the book through. And his feedback to me was, you're not going to want to hear this, but I think that part of what's not working is all the other stuff that you've built around the core story of Blythe and motherhood. And his advice to me was, maybe you should think about taking it all out and just starting again with focus on this core story that you have that's working so well compared to the other stuff. And, I was very pregnant at the time with my second child, and that was not good advice to take I wasn't in a good state to kind of hear that at the time.
And you turned to him and said, "Box."
Exactly. Yeah. It was a brave move, but it turned out to be probably the best advice that I've ever gotten, best practical advice I've ever gotten, because I let that simmer for a while, and then eventually kind of turned back to the manuscript. And I did end up doing that. I ended up deleting like 75% of the book, and starting again and just focusing on the stuff that I felt was the strongest, and building it up from there. I'm not worrying about what a thriller does or what a psychological thriller does. But at the end of the day, like, the book is about fear and motherhood, and that is, very central to the story. And we know book, that is also very central to the thriller genre. And so, it did become suspenseful, and it did kind of end up in that space. And we sort of had a lot of talks with my wonderful publishers and the editors to kind of say, like, is this a psychological thriller? Well, it is. It's suspenseful. But one of Pamela Dorman, who's just incredible, said, I think the best way to describe this is emotional suspense, which I think is probably a little more accurate. But I don't know if that's like a sales category at the bookstore. But
it works.
but it's within that range. Yeah. Yeah.
It completely works. And there's so much we're not talking about in this book. So as much as I'm telling you about this book, there's a lot that I'm not, because I can't spoil it for the reader, because there's so many surprises. And there's so much I want to ask you that I'm not going to be able to because of this. But I will share with everybody, these are all the pages that I folded down in this book of things I did want to talk to her about. So just know that there's so much there. And I am haunted by little pink gloves. That's all I'm just going to say. I'm just haunted. And when you read, you'll figure out why. But I'm not going to say anything more about that. So the day you get published, you get this really great news that you're the Good Morning America Book Club pick. And for January, what was that like when you heard that news?
Oh my gosh, that was wild. That was a really exciting day when Pam Dorman called to tell me that. And I think as when you have a book coming out and you see these big book clubs that are just do wonderful things for books and they're so supportive and help you reach so many more readers. And I think you sort of hope and pray that someone might be interested, but you never expect it at all. And I guess they confirmed it in the summer. I think it was, it must have been maybe August. July or August. And I remember I was at my cottage with my kids and with a friend and her kids, and we were all just kind of playing in the lake, and my phone was sort of rang from the dock. And I thought, well, that's weird, because like literally nobody ever calls me like that. That's very strange. And kind of went to check, and I saw that it was Pam, and I kind of just like left my kids in the water and like ran to the like and trying to like find a cell signal, because I thought, okay, she must like have something good to say if she's calling. And and it was great. And I think I literally screamed when she told me, because I was so excited. So that was really good news for everybody. Yeah. And then the reveal of it, which coincided with publication day, which was wonderful. It's just so grateful for it. I mean, it's wonderful. I'm really excited.
But of course, then you had to put down your phone and everybody goes, what are you yelling about? Nothing.
Nothing. It's totally confidential.
They decided the cover is going to have purple on it. Like, I'm so excited about that, because then you can't tell anybody anything.
You can't. It's the top secret. And we didn't, nobody knew. It was, really exciting.
I remember Tayari Jones telling me when American Marriage was picked by Oprah, and she said her mother says, what's going on with the book? She goes, nothing. What's going on? Nothing's happening. Nothing. Is there any big publication? No, nothing's happening. Nothing happening. And you just have to sit there and keep repeating, nothing's happening, while inside you're just like, this is such exciting stuff. Yeah. They're like really 4 people that can know, and you're not one.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. It was a gift, a total gift. Yeah.
And then you'll be on the show talking about the book, which will be incredibly fun too.
Yes, it will be. Yeah. We're just talking about that now, trying to arrange times, and everything being so remote these days. So we'll figure it out. But I'm looking forward to that.
You don't have to fly from Toronto. You can just be wherever you are and do
exactly.
This,
Yes. Yeah.
Kristen also said this is an intense psychological drama that will be embraced by serious book clubs and fans of Lionel Shriver's We Need to Talk About Kevin. Had you read We Need to Talk About Kevin in advance? Had you read that book?
Yes, I read that book the year it came out, which I think was, I want to say it's like, was it 2005 maybe?
Maybe.
I remember having just graduated college when that book came out, and I actually remember the experience of reading it. Like I remember I read it on an airplane, and like the whole thing in one sitting. And that book I remember really loving that book at the time. But it's funny, I didn't think about it at all when I was writing The Push, and it wasn't until later that I think it was my some early reader had said, oh, it like reminds me of this. And I thought, oh my God, yes. And it was a lot of it, theme obviously, but also that voice that we were talking about, that kind of second person voice, which I realized kind of when I went back to read it after. It's wonderful. To be, she's a very talented literary writer, and this book cannot be compared to her, but it's that idea of kind of questioning your children, it will hopefully resonate with readers that liked that book too.
Well, I'm in 2 book clubs. One is my neighborhood book group, and one is this young mom's book group. They invite me to be in just because I read a lot of books. And the other day I said, we were trying to decide what to read. And I said, we could read The Push. And one goes, that might be too close to my life. It was very funny. But they all knew that it was the Good Morning America pick. It was funny.
Oh, that's wonderful.
They were all going, that book was on GMA this morning. It was really nice to be able to see that, and I think we will read it somewhere along the way, because it's just books you can discuss for hours. If book groups do want to reach out to you and discuss books, can they reach out on your website to set up to talk to you?
Yes, definitely. There's a contact form on my website, and so you can submit through that, and I'll get back to you for sure. I would love that. Yeah.
So was the push always the title of the book? Was that always?
It's funny. Yes, but it remained untitled, the entire time that I was writing it, which I mean was like, I think I worked on it for like over 3 years before I submitted it to agents. And so for those 3 years, it was literally just called Untitled on my desktop. And the title, I wasn't even thinking about a title at the time, and it just kind of came to me. It was one of those great moments where things just pop into your head and you're grateful for them. And so I called it The Push when I went out to it with agents, and my agent liked it. We kind of talked about, should it change, like, keeping it. I worked in publishing, so I know the titles often do change, and so you cannot get married to anything. And then the UK, Michael Joseph in the UK were the first to buy the book, like the first deal that my agent did. And they had said right away, we love the title, we need to keep the title. And so from that point, I think we thought, okay, well, we'll run with it. And thankfully the other publishers in the US and Canada and everywhere else really liked it as well. So, I mean, internationally it's translated. Sometimes it translates, and there's some other various titles too that don't, because the push doesn't translate that well everywhere. But it's, a lot of markets are using it, which is wonderful.
It really worked. And let's talk about the cover. Was this always the cover? Because the cover is, I'm trying to make sure that I get this on the right way. I never said there we go. So was this the first cover you saw, or was this something that happened along the way?
No, this happened along the way. I love this cover. I could not love it more. And I love I love covers in general. And so I was really excited about these discussions. So it wasn't the first one, although I think that image was the first real cover I think that I saw from the UK. And the US had looked at some other options, and they kind of get everyone's kind of input on it and all that. And then and then somewhere along the way they thought, we really like this image, but the font is different here. I think it has I love this, but I think it's very suspenseful and sort of says something about the book.
Line through it. Yeah. So
I'm really happy with it. It feels right.
And I love the touches of violet on it. That did not go missed by me. That did not go missed. I also listened to an excerpt of the audiobook, and I felt that the narrator voice was spot on of what I was expecting to hear. Did you have any hand in the selection of the narrator? Were you?
Oh, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think so too. I feel it's Marin, Ireland, and it's so good. I think it's Marin, Ireland. So yes, they sent me 2 options to have input on, and they were both great, but this Marin really it felt very right to me for sure. And as soon as I heard her kind of reading that opening, I thought, oh, she's perfect. So thank you. And it's cool. It's definitely cool to hear her read it.
The bits I heard, she's got that bit of holding back some of herself there and putting herself out. It's just this right tension in her voice and right expression that from just hearing the first lines, I'm like, that's exactly what I would expect her to say. That's exactly what I expect her to hear. Just really
that's great to hear.
So you were a publicist, we've alluded to a few times, a Penguin Random House in Canada, possibly director, if I remember right. And when you were thinking about describing and pitching this book, was that always in the back of your head of like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do?
Yes. You mean, yes. Do you mean doing the publicity and stuff for the push? Yeah. Oh yes. I was sort of, I mean, obviously that is where was originally most comfortable, is kind of doing the pitching and writing the press releases, and rather than kind of talking about the book, but it's funny. I mean, I will say the publicists that I have in all of the markets are far better than I ever was as a publicist. Like, they're very, very good, and I feel like I'm in very good hands with them. So I'm just in awe of everything they've done, and feel very grateful for that. But it's different. It's definitely different being on this side. I mean, I feel I feel like, I feel most like a writer. I feel, I loved working in publicity, and I loved working in PR and communications, but I always wanted to be a writer, and that this feels like really who I am. So it's very nice to be in these shoes now.
So with that in mind, is there something next? Can we look forward to something next, and have you started it?
Yes, I have. Yes. Thank you for asking. So there is a second book that is it's going through revisions right now. And it's called The Whispers. And and it will be coming at some point. I don't know when, but we'll see. But it's been really fun to write. It's different than the push, and that the characters are different, and the world is different. But I think it touches on some of the same themes of kind of marriage and motherhood. And it's been really fun to write. It's been very different to write than the push, but it's been very fun. Yeah.
Was it easier once you got a deal to like do the second book, that because then you can say, I'm a writer? Like before it was, I'm an aspiring writer. And now it's, I'm a writer. I've got a deal. I'm going to write this with some confidence that somebody saw they loved my work besides my partner, besides Michael saying it was like really good,
Yeah, no, it's so true. I think there's sort of, I personally experienced kind of two sides to it. One was it's very motivating because you've got a deadline and, somebody wants it, somebody is going to read it. You know your editors so well by then. And so, you feel, I had a different sort of motivation for it. And felt very inspired and excited to write it, and had kind of had the idea, sold the second book on the idea. It was a 2-book deal when most markets bought it. So I'd had it kind of brewing for a while, and I was kind of excited to kind of be writing something different. So from that part of it, yes, but it is at the same time, like that can be hindering as well, because, when I was writing the push, I really just wrote it for myself. Like that is really true. I mean, you really don't know if anyone, especially in the earlier days when I was just kind of writing scenes that came to me, I didn't really know what the book was going to be. I mean, really fully just writing to enjoy. I just loved it. I just enjoyed it and was only writing for me. So it is meant, you're in a different mental state, I think, when you're writing the second book, and people are going to read it, or you hope people are going to read it. So it's different, but I still love it. I've loved writing it. Yeah. I've loved the chance at new characters and new problems and all of that. It's just been fun.
Does Blythe still haunt you though? Like, have you let go of her completely? Well, now you have, it's interesting too, because you've got, the other book is being written. This one you're talking about, and there are times where you're talking about the book and you're like, wait a second, which book is it? Like, what's happening? Do I have the right character? Like, because you're in a different head.
You're in a different head.
I often joke with authors, like, write all your behind the book materials when you finish that book, because you're going to be in a different place,
It's so true. I know that's really true. One big difference is the push is, we talked about that perspective of really that tight perspective of Blythe, and the whispers is multiple characters and third person points of view for each of them. So the points of view are so different, and but yet I'm still trying to find a different voice for each of them, sort of even in that kind of third person, so that we have that distinction between the different characters. So it's just been a completely different exercise from that perspective. So yeah, it is. So I feel like they're not as muddled in my mind right now, but I think there's still time for that. I'm sure.
But you're also thinking about, when you think about the voice of Marin and how good she did a great job of you realize those three voices are going to have to be very distinct for the reader to follow along if you're just doing the audio experience. Because if not, it's all, and it really has to come across in the words if there's just one voice. So it's a big challenge. And I think that with audio becoming so much bigger, it's something you really have to think about.
That's such a good point. It's really such a good point. Yeah. And I've heard some audiobooks where, they will have the different, it'll be kind of be multiple cast, but it's not as common, right, as just having kind of the one. Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
But it's even for the reader, it's like, what would so-and-so say? And the other character wouldn't say that, or they wouldn't act like that, or their gesture wouldn't be like that. It's just, it's a different experience. And I think as you go through, I also love the fact that you were revising so much, and you were into revising so much. I was talking to somebody yesterday, giving me a manuscript, and I said, you do realize that most people will write something 5 or 7 times. I've actually had writer friends say they walked away from a book because they just didn't want to spend that much more time with it. It just,
interesting.
I wasn't into it. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah, I did enjoy it. I think now I sort of know, I think going into my second book, I understand the value of revision now, like, because I've experienced it firsthand. I know how valuable it is to get, the input from editors, and I know how valuable, like, I have a handful of trusted readers, like early readers, like, good friends who are great some of them are writers themselves. And I know how to kind of work with their feedback more. But I think the first time with the push, I remember finishing the push and thinking like it was as good as I could make it. And I couldn't conceive of how other people were going to make it better. Do you know what I mean by that? Like it was sort of, so I was kind of like, well, maybe I'm not going to need to revise it that much. But that was very naive thinking, obviously. And you quickly realize, the value that you can get from other people. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it the first time because I'd never worked with an editor before. Like I'd never had that, that deep of an editorial relationship. So yeah, that it is kind of, I feel like I'm going into the fun part of that now with the Whispers.
It's also, you have to have a very deft editor to be able to do that as well, because there are times where people have said the book has been revised a lot, and I can tell. I can actually feel, because it's not smooth like this. It's like this was chopped from here, and this was chopped from there, and this was chopped from the other place. And you feel that kind of an action going on. And you might feel like somebody else almost needed to take the book away and read it. And then just say, wait, this needs to be smoother. And I never felt that for a moment reading this book. And
good. Thank you.
Everything was going on. But I will say that there's times where I'm kind of over edited. Like I feel like this, and that's not what I'm feeling here. I'm feeling this is like, oh, it's there. If not, all those pages, folks, would not have been folded down of all these things I want to talk about with her that I can't, We'll have to meet up someday and just do that.
Yes, I would love that.
So, well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's so much fun to be talking to you. Publication week. Congratulations on everything. And go back and keep working on that other book, because I'm ready.
Yes, I will. No, thank you, Carol. This was such a pleasure chatting with you. This was a lot of fun. And thank you for matching your outfit to the book cover.
There we go. Amazing. Here we go. It was done on purpose, folks. Who would normally wear turquoise with a violet? Walk to the closet to figure this out. Okay. Thanks so much to everyone. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.